South Korea barely made the top 20 in a new best countries ranking by U.S. News and World Report, based on the opinions of more than 16,000 people from around the world. I spoke with the executive editor of U.S. News and World Report about his company's first attempt to rank the world's top 60 countries through 65 different attributes.
My name is Tim Smart, and I oversee the news and opinion operation. We're known in the United States and, frankly, other parts of the world for our best colleges rankings and our best hospitals rankings. So we do a lot of traditional news coverage, but we also do these huge rankings of various institutions which are oriented towards consumers, but also are followed very closely by the respective industries. But this is the first one we've done of its kind. We partnered with two other entities, a consulting firm out of New York called Brand Asset Value, BAV, and Wharton School, which is the School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, very well regarded. And what we did was we put out a survey to more than 16,000 people. We did this in the middle of last year. The people were all over the globe and represented people in 36 different countries. And essentially, we asked in the survey them to state their perceptions of countries based on various attributes. There were 65 different attributes, but the kinds of attributes that they related to things like, did you consider the country to have an open government? Was it a transparent country? Was it a country that was favorable to do business? Was it a country that treated, had gender equality? And many, many more questions. Was it a country you'd traveled to? Would you consider going there for a medical procedure? And essentially what we got was a series of perceptions that ultimately were collected, and we weighted those against common economic measures like mainly GDP, and how those kinds of attributes were predictive of GDP, so that we ultimately came up with a ranking that really reflected how these countries were perceived around the world, but also how that would ultimately affect their performance going forward.
I also spoke with a representative of the consulting firm that worked on the ranking that gave the number 1 spot to Germany, followed by number 2 Canada, the United Kingdom at number 3, and the United States at number 4.
My name is Anna Blender, and I'm a Senior Vice President, BV Consulting. And we do a study globally that's what we call syndicated. So it's a very standard for the last 25 years that in the United States, for example, we studied 3,500 brands. We did a study in Korea last time in 2012, about 1,000 Korean brands. And as part of that, for the last 20 years, we've been studying countries as brands. And we found very interesting patterns where brand equity of countries actually correlated very highly with GDP, as well as other key metrics like foreign direct investment and tourism. So we thought, this is such an interesting concept to study by itself. Why don't we delve into it deeper? So to begin with, we created selection criteria for the countries, meaning that, they met these certain minimum criteria, they would make it in. And ultimately, we came up with these 60. So even the ones that are at the bottom 60, you could say, oh, they're the worst, not the best. But the truth is that they already came through a vetting process that, even emerging as the top 60 says something about the country. But, we do see Nordic countries really rise to the top. We've got Denmark, Netherlands, and Sweden all in the top 10. Right. And of course, Germany just does really well across the board, especially known as a place for innovation, entrepreneurship, and global citizenship, with Angela Merkel's leadership, especially in the last couple of years, and some of the crises that Europe has been facing, that has really helped Germany. And, doing so in a very empathetic way, but also with, great intellect and still a focus on driving great economic prosperity for its people.
South Korea made the top 20 at number 19, and I asked Tim Smart of U.S. News and World Report to explain how the ROK earned that spot.
While I think there is a perception that having the strongest economy or having the strongest military historically has ranked countries very high, frankly, what's happening now, we're seeing is that people perceive other attributes in countries. They want countries that are more progressive, that have more income equality, which was a huge boost to Canada and perhaps a little bit of a detriment to the United States. Having just a really strong military and being sort of the big boy on the block, if you will, isn't necessarily so appealing. So countries that were more with cultural heritage did reasonably well. And then South Korea's score's highest ranking came in power. Number 10 in power. It is considered a power in Asia, and it does have a strong military. It also did very well, number 12, on entrepreneurship. Other attributes that were associated with South Korea were, skilled labor force, an innovative country, technological expertise, entrepreneurial. It essentially came in, top 5 in those areas. So I think the business side of South Korea is highly regarded and respected around the world. I'm not sure that the sort of cultural heritage and sort of history of South Korea is appreciated. You don't think as much, at least I think in the Western world particularly, of South Korea in terms of its culture, in terms of it has nice food and everything, but it's not like a Spain or an Italy or France when it comes to culture, at least perception. And I must emphasize that this is perception, and the question is, when does reality catch up with perception, or how close reality is to perception? And I think any country on this list, frankly, has an opportunity to improve its perception around the world. And a lot of countries spend a lot of energy, a lot of money on their reputation and their perception. Others don't do as much. And, if you're stuck with a certain perception, it can be changed, probably for the good and probably for the bad.
And finally, BAC Consulting Vice President Anna Blender says culture isn't the only area where South Korea can improve its image.
Where the perceptions are not as great are around bureaucracy and transparency in the government and business. So that's something that's kind of holding Korea back from some of its potential. We also see that there's a really interesting difference in how business decision makers globally versus the general public see some of the opportunities in Korea. Business decision makers actually give Korea a lot of credit for providing, access to capital, for example. But the transparency issues, could be holding Korea back. So again, whether this is something that's real or not, it's kind of up to the government to try to create trust and transparency and make sure that it's communicating that and implementing policies around that can help drive kind of greater openness and ultimately, break down any barriers that currently exist, and I think will help the ranking as well.
For KoreaFM.net, I'm Chance Dorland.